Welcome to the Single Era Diaries, exploring the journey of a woman who hasn't experienced what it's like to be single in her entire adult life, and pretty much most of her teenage life too. Each episode will navigate the journey of finding a sense of identity, exploring the challenges of co-parenting, finding love of self, and healing, all whilst tackling the complexities of the checkered landscape of dating and dating apps, meeting new people, and operating solo in a world that celebrates couples, marriage, and codependency. I am your host, founder of Nascent Media and newly single woman, Jade Graham, and this is the diary of my single era. So I want to freestyle for a moment and share a little about the dating experience that I have just been on. For background context, I have been in a relationship for 16 years. The last time that I was single, I was not single for a great deal of time. I had before that been in a 5-year relationship. And before that, I'd been in a 2-year relationship. And before that, I was engaged. And before that, I was in a relationship with my high school sweetheart. And I had pretty much been in a relationship literally since I was about 13. I've had boyfriends pretty much consistently. And so, as a result of that, my first date experience was, I think, putting it mildly, a bit of a shit show because I jumped into doing the whole dating thing sooner than I had planned to post the breakup with my ex-partner. And I really did it in response to finding out that he had, towards the latter part of our relationship, been faithful and had been sleeping with somebody else. That's really a podcast story for another day in itself. But I guess the point is the fact that I jumped into it too soon. And so as a result, I hadn't really prepared myself for what it is that I was going to experience, and also hadn't really prepared myself by saying what it is that I wanted to find. And so the result was my just really jumping into a really, I would say, chemistry infused connection that was not necessarily what I would ordinarily do or ordinarily how I would ordinarily behave. But I really do want to be, I guess, when I'm reflecting on that first date experience, I want to be balanced in firstly acknowledging the fact that I did actually go on a first date. Like, I'm so proud of myself for the fact that I didn't cancel, even though I really did have some concerns before the date. And I shared my concerns with my girlfriends, and they were like, well, go on it, just, get the first one out of the way, which I did. So I'm really proud of myself for that. But I'm also really reflecting on the things that I got wrong that put me in a dating experience that was very far from being aligned with what it is that I want to call in for this dating experience. And it really will be a dating experience because whilst my ultimate aim and objective is to meet ideally my soulmate, like I really believe that this is now the soulmate era. I am really of the belief that I have cleared the karma from the last relationship that I have been in. That was definitely a karmic relationship, and I believe that now is the time for me to step into that soulmate true connection era. I recognize that in order to get there, that I will potentially need to meet and share time and energy with those that aren't necessarily 100% on the money. I'm not expecting myself to kind of go for the first person that comes along, which is really what I have done throughout my relationships previously. And I think the key difference, of course, here is the fact that I am, much older. I'm, a businesswoman. I'm a mother. I'm, I guess I have my shit together to a large extent, and that's a very different space that I'm in than when I met my ex-partner when I was like, what, 23, 24, post uni. I'd moved back up to the Midlands, which is where I'm from. I just moved back up from Southampton where I was studying, and I was in a really lost and dark place when I met my now ex. And understanding what I do now about energy and energetics and, the law of attraction and like attracting like, I think, having spent 16 years with my ex-partner, who is, of course, the father of my daughter and is, still a very dear friend, irrespective of the fact that our relationship not only unraveled, but I also found out that he had been sleeping with somebody else towards the end of our relationship. I do recognize that in the time that we were together, that we were really not only growing up, but also healing something in ourselves as well. We really were mirrors for one another. And I know that I challenged him to grow. And I think his presence certainly allowed me to grow and to expand as well. And now that means that I'm at, a point in time where just staying on the horse, like getting back onto the horse, like I'll be completely honest. I went on this first date and it was odd. It was very unusual. There were a number of red flags on the lead up to the date occurring. And look, I'll hold my hands up here. I participated in some red flag behavior too, that I really think goes a long way to demonstrate the fact that I was not in a good emotional state when I jumped into this dating experience. And I think as a result of that, I let my guard down far too quickly. I shared things about myself far too soon. And I think, vice versa. But what that did is it created a level of attachment, and it created, I think, a false sense of connection that was clearly very surface driven. And then the date itself was, I think, what's difficult here, having never really dated. So I've never dated. I've not ever been in a position where I've been single and I've gone out with different men in different settings and experienced that. I have quite literally moved from a relationship to a guy pursuing me and my succumbing to that pursuit and then moving into a relationship with him. So I haven't done this before. And so what that does mean is that this first date that I went on was it's literally my first experience of having really been dated where the aim will not necessarily to go into a relationship with that person. But let me just walk through some of the red flags. So there was lots of sort of oversharing, I think, in the conversation and the discourse, and the lead up to the date. I mean, let me be candid here. It became quite heated between he and I. There was definitely a sort of like a sexual connection there, which is really unusual given that he and I hadn't met, but we were talking for like 2 weeks, and we were talking like every day for 2 weeks, like morning, noon, night, and really into like the early hours of the morning. It felt very electric in that sense. But there were some disclosures on his part in terms of the things that he was into that I traditionally am not into. But again, I think when you're in an emotional state and you're not necessarily thinking with a clear mind, then it's really easy, I think, to sort of fall into rabbit holes. And I absolutely did do that. And I'm quite surprised at myself, actually, that I slipped into rabbit holes that I wouldn't ordinarily have done. I also think that, conversely, being accountable again for my own behavior and how I sort of communicated, I really rushed in. Like, I just feel like there's like this teenage sort of, or maybe like early sort of like late teens, early 20s girl in me that just ran out and was like, oh, I'm looking for a husband, I'm looking for this, like just such desperate energy, such just really communicating in a way that was really, I think, looking back on it, I do feel a flush of embarrassment, but I also give myself grace for the fact that, I was being shown attention. It sounds so needy, and actually I'm just going to honor that as well, actually, that there is an element of neediness here. But I showed a degree of, I think, transparency far too quickly, and I think all of that did play into, by the time we actually got to the date, it was kind of like we'd covered off all bases already, and I'd sort of backtracked on things and had sort of changed my mind, which is a really it's a trait that I have. I now know, of course, that's because I've got ADHD. But back to the date and just sort of the red flags that were leading up to it. So definite oversharing, definitely, quickly moving into sort of intimate discussions far too quickly. Really being transparent about things to do with my life and vice versa on his part. I mean, I know an enormous amount about this guy. To say that I've only met him once, I know, or at least I think I know from what he shared with me, a huge amount. I think that that's perhaps too much too soon. And I definitely think there's something to be learned there in terms of having a degree of discernment and being able to sort of pull back from things as well, and not being, so overly comfortable that you're sharing your entire life story at the outset, because it's not necessary. And I think if you, like myself, have had a sort of a difficult and challenging path, that by sharing that level of intimate detail about you and your life, it can put you in a bit of a sort of a position of vulnerability. And there are, of course, men out there, and women, of course, who will see that vulnerability and they will not necessarily want to protect it. They'll want to take advantage of it. And so with that, the red flags continued. There was obvious discussion on his part about his financial situation. And, again, not to be disparaging, I really admire anybody that is rebuilding their lives and, doing things to build themselves up. But I don't know that I'm necessarily, and this again is for, anybody that's in that dating scene, you need to decide as to whether you want to be a part of that journey or not. Like, is that going to suck your energy to be a part of that journey? And having spent, close to 2 decades with somebody whose life I have, pretty much funded in the most part, have certainly, contributed or sought to contribute to their personal development. It's really draining, and it really detracts from your own path of personal development. So I think, that was, an obvious red flag. It was almost like a duplication of what I've experienced in my previous relationship. And then also things like, I was doing a lot of the doing. Like, I was selecting the options for where to go and presenting them to him, and then giving him the option to choose, rather than actually what I very much need to become better at is being with somebody that, takes the lead with that. Like, it shouldn't just be a woman's choice and all of that. Like, no, like, you go find somewhere for us to go. Like, if you're going to take me out for a date, then, organize things, like look for things. Like, so again, that was, definitely on my part, I was much too prepared to just step into the doing mode, which is very much learned behavior. Again, I've been in my relationship really doing, like, from, the cities that we've lived in, the apartments that we've lived in, the houses that we've lived in, like, every decision that is made has fallen to me. And I am, a powerful woman in that respect. I do very much know my own mind. I'm very independent. I'm completely self-sufficient, and I have been, like that my whole life. But I'm really looking for something different now. And I think the fact that I didn't acknowledge that was happening and that I was again in the lead should really have highlighted to me that this was not going to go down so well. And so, yeah, I mean, the discussions on the lead up were, again, looking back, it was very much me sort of go-getting, me hustling. Like, the energetics of that dynamic were really not going to work out, I don't think. And so we got to the date, and the guy was late. I had bought some sparkling water. I had, wasn't intending on drinking because I was driving, but it would have been nice when the date got there if I would have been asked if I wanted a drink, or, do you want Are you hungry? Would you like to? Like, there was literally like no offer whatsoever. He just joined in with drinking my sparkling water. And, I think a box ticked for him pouring the water. But I think if that's the highlight of your dating experience, then, it's a pretty low bar. So he didn't ask if I wanted a drink. He didn't ask if I wanted to have anything to eat. He didn't offer any of that. He was late. He got up throughout the date to go and have a wander over and have a look at a cat that was wandering around. I mean, there were lots of really random things that I'm laughing about now, because I'm not a judgmental person. Like, I'm a very open and accepting person of people's quirks and differences. And I actually really liked him as well. Like, as a person, he had a very intelligent level of discourse, and he had great conversation and great chat. And I think I was doing what I have been guilty of doing in the past, which is, and I can say this definitely from experience with my ex, that like you see and hear these red flags and you go, well, that's okay. And then you get out this enormous pair of rose tinted glasses and you put them on, and you put some earphones on to kind of block out the noise of your own intuition screaming at you to not go any further. And I've really got to question where that comes from. I think I have some answers, and I think it's very much to do with my youth and my upbringing and the sort of things that I experienced in my home that were accepted norms that really aren't and should not be accepted norms. And again, that's another podcast for another day. But I think it's really interesting the things that I, accepted on this date. So, for example, like smoking. I'm not into smoking, and I wouldn't ordinarily choose to go on a date with a smoker. And the guy was smoking roll-ups. To anybody that smokes or smokes roll-ups, like, I get all of that, but this was a date situation, and I really feel that, like anything, I guess, when it's your first meeting, like, first impressions count. So, like, turning up late, smoking roll-ups, like, all these things are, again, should really have just highlighted to me, like, the guy's not that into you. Like, if he's doing this, he's clearly not that into you. And again, looking back, it was very, very obvious that he wasn't that into me, and that's absolutely okay. Date continued. It was getting colder. We sat out on sort of an outside terrace in a really lovely restaurant come bar in the countryside, in between where he and I live, and it was a really lovely setting, and it really could have been a really lovely place to have that sort of first date and connection. But he did a lot of talking, not a lot of asking. There was very little interest in what I had to say, is how I feel reflecting back. It was very much a sort of a dialogue on his part, and not really looking to explore or expand into really anything more about our lives, I guess, sort of outside what we'd already been speaking about. And so I get the sense now, again, that it was sort of a going through the motions, that like perhaps he just didn't really want to be there at all, and he came just because we'd said we're going on a date. But all of that aside, we finished the date and he did kiss me, which I'm still struggling to wrap my head around, why you would do that if you don't like somebody. And again, kind of coming full circle on this whole experience of dating for the first time, because I have not been single since I was really, like, very briefly in my early 20s. And then before that, like, as a teenager, like, they're my experiences of being single. And so I'm kind of racking my brain in this sense of there's almost this immature, undeveloped part of myself that's like still a teenager, being like, well, why would you kiss? Like, you only kiss people that you really like. But also, fully grown men in their 40s who, maybe aren't getting to do the things that they want to do. Maybe they do just kiss people. Maybe that's how they get off. I don't know. But I found that a little bit strange and unusual, and I kissed him back, and I was really surprised. I'm surprised at myself, and I was fully prepared to continue to go on another date with this guy. And actually, irrespective of the fact that he didn't pay, and he smoked, and he was late, and he wasn't very interested in me, I was still prepared to go on another date with this guy, which is madness, absolute madness. But he actually was like, I just don't think I want to carry on. So actually, it wasn't actually me that sort of called this off. It was actually him. And me being the me that I am, which is really scrappy, has fought and worked my bottom off for everything that I have, has really had to endure a lot, put up with a lot, overcome a lot. Like, I'm a scrappy woman. Like, I fight for everything. I see that it's falling away, like I must fight for it. And like I've almost embarrassed myself, because I'm kind of like, but I'm a cat, like, you know, I'm brilliant, like trying to kind of like pitch myself, you know, why me, which again, you know, does really come back, I think, to the sadness of, you know, a 16-year relationship ending and finding out that person who you have spent your life growing up with and trusted pretty much implicitly has done something to behind your back and has hurt you and lied about it. So I think, you know, there's an element of that in there. And with all of that said, I did delete my dating profile, and I was like, this is just bullshit. I really don't want to do this. I don't want to be in a position where I'm going to be fucked around and led along and led on and being told things like, oh, I'm catching feelings for you and going to see where this goes, and just all of those sort of carrot on a stick to get you to, I mean, presumably the guy was just after one thing. I think that's fairly evident now, and I'm not that girl. Like, I'm not that woman. I'm not the person that, I've never again been the person that sort of, you know, puts out, that's not who I am and it's not how I behave. And so, you know, I think I've really got to get back on the horse. I've put my profile back up. I've put it back up and taken it down like 3 times. So I've put it back up now, and I've done it in an intentional way where I've been open and transparent about what it is that I want and what I think the direction of travel will be for this process, which is, you know, chatting, a date, if that works out, maybe another date, and then who knows, maybe a relationship, which could lead to happily ever after. But it has to start off slow, and I really need to be clear about the boundaries of what I'm prepared to talk about, both in messaging but also when it moves off the app into WhatsApp. Like, what's the context of the conversations? I think it's so important for anybody. This is really advice for anybody, not only with dating but with any human interaction in life. Like, what's your criteria? What's your minimum expectation? What's your maximum expectation? What are your aims? What are your objectives? What is it that you're going into this experience with the aim of achieving? And that's not to say that you should be fixed and set. Of course, there has to be a level of agility. There needs to be a level of agility with everything and responsiveness to the situation as it begins to unfold. But I do think that holding true to your beliefs and values and what your expectations are is absolutely vital, because I felt pretty bruised after this experience. It's been a week, and it's probably taken me about a week to get over it, for my nervous system to settle back down, to feel re-regulated again, going through almost like a bit of a micro heartbreak of the sense of believing and hoping for something to happen, viewing something with potential, feeling a connection which was so powerful, like that sense of, oh my gosh, like this guy, like he's artsy and he's cool and he seems quite quirky, he's like, you know, all of those things, and kind of falling for that idea, not reality but an idea. Yeah, it's taken about a week for me to get over that and to think, well, the only way that you can learn and heal from something is if you go again. So you have to just go again, but learn from the last time and implement the things that you have learned from that last time into this next time. And so that's what I'm going back into this with. So that is my first blurb, I guess, of the single girl era. And I look forward to sharing more insights and hopefully a lot more of what it is that I'm learning from this process, because I am so aware of the fact that there are very many women who will be in a similar situation to myself right now, where they've left a long-term relationship, have not really been single, or certainly haven't as an adult, and trying to navigate this world does feel a lot like being dropped into the Atlantic Ocean, where there's some island that you've got to swim to, you've got to survive the ocean and the sharks and the fact that you're in the middle of the ocean. Like, you've got to survive all of that to get to the island, and then you get to the island and there's going to be even more to sort of navigate and deal with. That's definitely what this feels like for me right now. It's terrifying and exhilarating, and I'm sure other women will be feeling the same. And so this will hopefully become something where I share the escapades of the single girl. I mean, I'm definitely a woman now, like a single woman era. But if this helps, if it can reach one person, and if this can help anybody else on their journey, then we're all good. So thanks for listening. Date safely. Take care. The Single Era Diaries. produced and distributed by Nascent Media and executive produced by me, Jade Graham. Podcasts grow by being liked and shared, so if you enjoyed today's show, then please be sure to like and share with a friend who you think will enjoy the show too. Subscribe, and if you have a moment to rate and review wherever it is that you listen to your podcast, that would be super appreciated too. Thank you for listening.